In this video, I'm going to be modeling an object from a series of reference images as I've asked you to do for Project 2. And I think this will be really helpful for you to see how I model, how I think about modeling a really clean model. So what are the different, how do I use, I think it's great to know what these tools are, but really to see how they're used in practice is I think could be really helpful to you. I've also uploaded a copy of this file and the images that I used. So should you want to follow along with this video as I'm modeling so that you can get some good practice in of how to use all of these tools kind of correctly, then you can absolutely do that. And also like the finished, my finished Maya file, I will upload that as well so that you can see just kind of how mine turned out on your own and kind of poke around at the mesh and see how it all works, okay? So the first thing that I always do here is I want to set my project folder. I'm going to go File, Set Project, and I want to choose my Demos folder, and I want to set that. And I just want to make sure if I haven't done this yet, if I've created a new folder, that I set in my project window all of these files, okay, all of them, excuse me, all these folders where your files that you tie into Maya will populate. Okay, so this keeps everything really organized. Just remember to always do this whenever you start a project or you start a new Maya file. And you can feel free to, save multiple projects into your project folder or multiple scenes. This is one scene, so let me go ahead and save this scene just so you can see. And so it will automatically, because it already knows what to do, it's going to drop this Maya scene into the scenes folder in the project folder. So I already have one here that's called Project 1 Scene 1. I'm going to go ahead and actually save over it. I was practicing before I started this video on how I was going to model my object. So I'm going to say, I'm going to replace it with this file here. So I've taken a number of photographs of my object. I'm going to go ahead and start to bring them into my workspace. And I'm going to do that by going to Create Free Image Plane. And when I create a free image plane here, under my attribute editor, you can see that there is a place to tie in a path to a JPEG, either a JPEG or a TIFF or some kind of photographic image. Well, really any kind of image, just some kind of you can tie in an image here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that file folder. And for this one, I'm going to choose the side. And what I've decided to model is my daughter's xylophone. And I've chosen this object because I think it has enough complexity and it'll allow me to really focus on details. The form itself is really simple, but I can focus on details to get it looking like pretty similar to what this original object looks like. So, and it also will allow me to showcase for you a number of the tools that we've kind of been going over in the previous videos. So let me go ahead and open this. And so here you see we have our side view, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new image plane. And this one I'm going to want to rotate, and I believe I want to rotate it around the Z-axis. I'm not sure if that's right. That's not right. I want to rotate it around the Y. And this, I am going to go into my attribute editor and image plane shape and find the image name, and now I'm going to drop in the front. And I've named these, I've renamed all of my images so that I know what they are. I mean, I can't click on them and see, but it makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and open the front of this, and I'm going to create one more. And I guess this one I'm going to want to rotate around the X. And I'm going to insert the top. Okay. And so one thing I can do here, which is helpful, is I can turn down the alpha, which will change the opacity of each of these image planes. And I also am going to want to rescale them so that they kind of recreate the size of this. I mean, the distance from my object as I was taking these photographs wasn't maintained. So let me try by eyeballing it first, just to kind of rescale using my scale tool. And that looks still a little bit small. Let me make that a bit bigger. I'm just using my other reference image to kind of adjust the size. I'm also going to rotate this just a little bit like that. And let me now do the same for the top here. The other thing I want to do is I want to position this I'm going to be creating this object at the origin of my grid. This is really important to do. It'll make using some of the operations like mirror, for example, a lot easier, and it'll speed up your modeling time if you're always modeling kind of with your object being at the origin of the workspace. So I'm going to try to line that up. I'm going to rotate this. And actually, this will be a lot easier if I'm working in my orthographic views. Let me go to the top here. And I'm just going to try to line up the center of this, of my top view, with what's underneath the line of the grid underneath. And let me go ahead and go to my side view. And actually, you know, it says side, but it's the front. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about that. And if I kind of line that up there and go to my front view, well, I might want to do this in perspective view so I can see the others. Let me kind of pull this out a bit. And I'm going to pull this one down. And it looks like I want to increase the size of the top. That's good enough for me to get started. Okay. Move this. I'm going to move all of these up a little bit. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a layer here for all my image planes under my channel box layer editor. And again, I'm going to click this icon here that says assign selected objects to a new layer. And I'm going to click this box to R, which means that now I'm not able to click these. I'm not able to select these in the scene. And I'm also able to very easily turn them on and off their visibility. Okay, so that's helpful. All right, I'm going to start to model this, and I'm going to be modeling in polys. And I'm going to use poly primitives to model this. And there's a pretty good reason why you would want to. One, they have symmetry to them, and so some of the operations, like I was saying, talking about mirror, operate based on symmetry. And another thing is that they're closed objects, right? This is a whole closed mesh. It has a seamless mesh skin, and on the interior we don't have any geometry that's like collapsing in on itself, and there's nothing in the interior. So while each one of these faces has no depth altogether as a solid object, it's almost as if it's a solid, even though we can scroll. If we're thinking about creating an object that you might want to 3D print or think about 3D printing, you want to be modeling something that doesn't doesn't have any part of itself in the interior. You want something that is a solid object here. Any 3D printer is going to recognize this as solid and print this as a solid form. If you have anything inside here or any part of the mesh that's not clean, it's not going to know what to do with it. Okay, so this is why I like to start with these primitives in order to model. And so I'm going to start modeling the body, just using the scale tool. I'm going to go ahead and select my image planes here in my outliner. Even though I can't select them in the viewport, I can still select them in the outliner. I'm going to try to center this object, center my image plane so that my object is still centered on the grid. Okay. And let me go to my top view to really get this pretty accurate. Bring it down a little bit, and I'm going to widen it. And I'm going to go to the back and right click and go into face mode. Select this face. Now I must have something turned on here. Okay, I have this transform constraint. Always be aware of, so what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to increase the size of this face in the Z direction, but it's not allowing me to. It's sliding it along these edges, and that's because I have this transform constraint on. So if something's not working in Maya, it's because you probably had set some kind of selection constraint, and it's whether it's soft selection or in this case this transform constraint. So I'm going to turn that to off, and now I should be able to open this up here. Go to my top view. And I'm going to go to my front view, which is really the side view, and increase the height of this. And now let me go back, select all my image planes, and raise that up so that I'm maintaining my model in the center of my workspace. Another thing so that I'm able to kind of see through my model is I can hit 4 on my keyboard, and that will bring me to wireframe mode so that I'm able to see through my object. And I'm just going to scale it down just a little bit more because I'm being kind of particular. And I think that that should be good. Okay. What do I want to do next here with this is whenever I model, I'm going to look at, like if I'm looking here and hit 4 in this viewport. Oh, I see. I actually just only scaled up that one face, and I wanted to scale up the whole object. Let me go back to object mode and scale the whole object up, and then select my image planes here, and I'm just going to move them up. Okay. Let me just rotate this. So whenever I'm modeling, an object, like this one in particular, I'm going to be modeling bigger details first and then honing in on smaller details. I think that the analogy I gave before is a kind of like if you're modeling like a human form out of a block of clay, you're not going to start to like you have your like cube of clay. You're not going to start to like put detail into the face. You're going to block out the form, and then you're going to refine the form, and you're going to do it overall over the whole sculpture, and then you're going to get down into the fine details. And you're going to do the same thing here modeling in Maya. So the first thing I want to do, or the main, I'm working here on the biggest component, which is the body of the xylophone, and a detail here is that there's a bevel along the side. So in order to build that, I am going to drop in an edge loop. I'm going to work in wireframe mode here. Let me go into Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. Let me go to my tool settings and just see what I have here. I do have this equal multiplier, so that'll place one edge loop right in the center. I actually want to do relative distance instead. Go back to my front view here and drop that edge loop about there. And now what I'll do is go to face mode. And I want to select the faces. Back to perspective view. Another detail that I'm noticing is that this edge seems to have a kind of slope to it and then it flattens out again. So I'm actually going to select the top here, bring that down, and use my extrude tool and extrude that up. Hit 5 here. You can see kind of what I've done. Okay. Next, what I want to do is create this kind of rounded, rounded edges here on the xylophone. So let me click off my extrude tool. And the way I'm going to do that is by selecting an edge mode and shift selecting the edges. That I want to bevel. I'm going to use the bevel tool here. Let me go to 4 just to make sure I have my selections, right selections highlighted. And so I'm going to go to bevel. And this is something that I realized, excuse me, in my trial run of modeling this thing, that I want to actually miter this along the edge. And that will maintain the miter along that edge. And let me increase the sections. Go from the top view to see if it's got the, sort of has the right size. Let me see if like maybe 0.4 is a little better. Maybe 4.45. I think 0.4 looked pretty good. It has a nice kind of rounded edge to it. And let me go back to my selection tool here. I'm going to undo and change the way this is mitering. I'm actually going to change it to center. I don't really love the way any of this is kind of processing my miters. When I did auto, oh, that's part of an issue too. Let me undo this. And I pulled in on the left and the right, but I wanted to also pull in on the front and the back. Go back to face mode here. Select these two faces. And pull that back down. That's what I was looking for, because the front and the back also have that slight miter. Okay, so now if I go to edge mode and my edges are mostly still selected, turn off this for a moment. And now let me go and use my bevel tool. And that looks a lot better. Okay, that is what I wanted it to do. But if you can see, actually, let's see if it's doing it again. Oh, it's not this time. It was moving this vertice all the way down here when I had it on auto last time, so I set it to edge, but I guess it's recognizes what I want it to do at this point. Okay, I increased this to maybe like 3 sections, I think. Maybe 4. And then I said I wanted this at 0.4. Okay, so let me deselect. And then I also want to bevel the top edge, because this plastic xylophone has soft corners all the way around the object, so I want to mimic that in my model. So I'm going to use bevel again. This time maybe I'm going to give it 2 segments, and I'm going to decrease the fraction. I can either type in a value there, or I can left mouse click over the name here of the any of these names, and I can like change the value that way. Looks pretty good. And now I think I can double click around this edge and it will recognize that as an edge loop. So I'm going to go ahead and bevel it again. And you know, I didn't let me go ahead and redo this first bevel because I didn't see what I actually ended my value, my fraction value on here, and I want to repeat it, whatever I do in the bottom bevel. Okay, so it was at 0.3, so I'll double click this, and I'm just going to repeat that here, 3 and 2. See if that looks pretty good. I might actually increase this a little bit. And if I turn back on my layer box, layer editor, and I'm actually going to turn off the visibility here so I can just see. I think that looks pretty good. It has a smaller bevel at the top and then a rounder bevel at the bottom. So I'm pretty happy with the way this is looking so far. I'm going to do the same, a slight bevel on the bottom. And unfortunately, if I double click on this edge loop, it doesn't recognize it as an edge loop because we don't have, we have these faces after doing the bevel tool that have more than 4 sides, so it doesn't allow me to select an edge loop. It doesn't recognize this as an edge loop. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to add these grooves through the body. There's one on the top, and then if I actually go to my top here, I'm going to duplicate this image plane and change the source that it's tying into. I can actually do that even just by typing it in. Typing in the name of the image if it's in the same source image folder. I'm going to have to rotate this around. Okay, and this is just going to be a reference to I am going to want to, let me go back to my layer editor here and turn the visibility off for, oh, because I duplicated it, it's still in that same, go and move this up. Let me turn off the visibility for the top. And also, while I'm at it, I might as well label what these are in my outliner so I know. And I can just double click here. Let me turn off visibility. I'm just hitting 0 on my keyboard to turn off the visibility so I can just see what this looks like underneath. And let me see. It just has that one little piece there missing. So I might not even worry about this. I think I'm, in the interest of time, just going to dig this channel out here. Okay. I'm going to actually turn visibility off for the bottom and turn it back on for the top. Okay, and go back to shaded mode by hitting 5. So in order to create this channel here, I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to rotate it in the X direction, 90 degrees. Where'd it go? Oh, I translated it 90. I want to rotate it 90. Not in the X, in the Y. I never can tell which direction I want to rotate it in. I think if I think about, and I always forget this, but like the axle would be Z, that the object is rotating around. So I would rotate it in the Z direction. I'm going to make this longer, and I'm going to make it longer than the body of my object. Let me shrink it down though so it's the correct diameter. Scale this up to make it longer and drop this down. And what I want to do now actually is if I'm looking at my cylinder, I'm going to increase under Attribute Editor because I have not manipulated any components in this object, so I'm still able to change my subdivisions. So I'm going to increase this to 12 so that I have kind of a flat, so that this object has an edge loop or a series of edges that lines up perfectly with the these X and Z axes. Okay, you can see that I did that by increasing it. And I also want to change the pivot position of this. Actually, I'm okay with where it is. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to turn face centers on under modify. Display, excuse me, polygons, and say face centers. And that will give me a point in the center of each of my faces. And now what I want to do is I want to line up my cylinder with the middle point on my object. So if I can you can see here that my pivot is in the center of my cylinder, and I have a point that sits flat on the top of my object. And so by using the snap tool, snap to point, and I'm moving my object exactly to that point, it will snap them in the exact same place. Here you can see what I've done. So I've embedded this cylinder right on the top of my, right on the top, laying with its diameter right on the top of my, the body of my xylophone. And the last thing I'm going to do is scale this up here like that, increase the channel. I can even actually, this might be a good idea. Let me show you another kind of cool trick. Let me select my edge. And because that oval wasn't the exact shape of that channel, and this might seem like such a silly detail at this point, but I'm just, again, just trying to illustrate for you like how you would create like really specific shapes. So I want to actually create a very specific shape. I don't want this to be an oval. I'm going to go in and select, let me work back in this mode. I'm going to go in and select the top, and I'm also going to just select the top edge, and I'm also going to go in and say symmetry in the Y to turn that on, and object Y, let's see if it will do it in world Y. No, it doesn't want to do it, huh? Does it in object Y? Oh, let me see where my pivot, this is another thing I need to just double check that it is in the Y direction. So I should, my symmetry should work. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't want to work. Okay, so instead I'm going to just shift select them. I'm going to turn this off. And I'm going to say, turn my soft selection on. And I'm going to decrease, let me go to my tool settings instead and soft selection here. I'm going to decrease the fall off radius. And I can see how this is affecting what will be changed in the shape. And now if I manipulate my cylinder, it's going to pull these vertices. Let me increase it a little bit more. Too much. Such a small object that I'm able to get this to be a little bit more of the shape I'm looking for. Okay. Now let me turn off soft selection. My object is still right where it needs to be. And now let me actually go, just because I'm being really particular, I'm going to scale this down a little bit on the sides. And I'm going to now do a union bool between these two. And I'm going to go up to my mesh tools and say, difference bool. I selected those in the wrong order. Let me select my object first, and then I'm going to cut a hole out with. Go to mesh and say difference. And so now I've cut a channel through my body of my my object. And because I had placed the typology or the flow around my model, that edge loop right on the surface of my xylophone, I have a really clean channel here and like really clean geometry. I don't have a bunch of edges in random places as a way to connect the two edges of the two objects as the Boolean operation was performed. I'm going to select these two edges and and just round them over a little bit. I'm just going to add another bevel, and I'm going to see if it'll let me do it. Bevel. Make sure I have this selected here, edge. Let me go ahead and turn off my visibility for a second. Okay. This is kind of interesting that I have vertices that have been placed here. So I have vertices that have been placed in the center. So it's just something for me to be kind of aware of. Might not be a bad idea to cut some edge loops in there, but I'll do that a bit later. There we go. So I've made that bevel, but I don't really think that that's quite the right shape. I think that that'll be fine. Let me go to my object mode here and just take a look at it. I just gave it a slight bevel. I think in the interest of time, we will be okay with that. I think there's one more bevel I'd do. This is a pretty hard edge here. My object has a kind of softer. It's a bit softer, so I want to just add one more bevel. On that edge loop, that's too big. But maybe something like that works. And let me go back to my object mode. Okay. Okay, so the body of the xylophone has been modeled. So I'm going to go ahead and don't forget to save along the way. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And in the next video, I'm going to start to add the wheels to this object. I'm not going to worry about the bottom with the screws. I'm going to be fine with the way the bottom looks there. Okay, but that could be, if you were really really obsessive, you could probably model those as well. Okay, so see you in the next video.